Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Elliot Vaughn felt his fork stop halfway to his mouth. For a second, he thought he'd misheard. His wife, Sloane, had just said she was going out to dinner with a coworker, and her tone was so casual it might as well have been about some email she got at work or the unpredictable weather that week. He slowly looked up, watching her closely. Sloane kept her relaxed posture, cutting small pieces of the steak on her plate like nothing was out of the ordinary. But Elliot knew Sloane. He knew when she was hiding something, and above all, he knew when she was testing him. He waited. Maybe she'd laugh and say she was kidding, or maybe she was expecting some dramatic reaction from him, but none of that happened. She just kept eating, acting like it was no big deal that her husband was now looking at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The air in the dining room seemed to thicken. Elliot set his fork down and rested his elbows on the table, examining every detail of her expression. He noticed Sloane wasn't meeting his eyes directly. That wasn't normal. She always held eye contact, especially when she wanted to prove a point. But that night, she kept looking away, focusing too hard on her own movements. "A coworker," he repeated, keeping his voice low and neutral. "Yes," she answered naturally, lifting her wineglass to her lips. "Just an informal dinner." Her calmness irritated him most of all. There was no hesitation, not the slightest trace of guilt or doubt. The answer came out smoothly, no pauses, as if she'd rehearsed it. Elliot laced his fingers together on the table. He wasn't naive. He knew marriages went through phases, and every now and then the desire for something new might creep in. But this wasn't about desire. It wasn't about wanting something new. It was a test. He realized that because Sloane had handed him this information on a silver platter, without him even asking. It was a game, and he needed to understand the rules before making his next move. "So this doesn't change anything between us?" he asked, keeping his tone controlled. Sloane finally looked up at him. The way she smiled made something twist inside him. "Of course not." Her voice sounded almost affectionate. "You know I love you." It hit him in a strange way. For a moment, Elliot felt like laughing. But instead, he just leaned back in his chair, feeling a lump tighten in his throat. There were several ways he could react. He could show outrage, demand a convincing explanation, or even turn this into a direct confrontation. But if he did that, he'd be reacting exactly how Sloane expected. So he went with something different. He smiled. It was a light, casual smile, the kind you'd give when hearing a not-so-funny joke. Then, with all the naturalness in the world, he said, "Maybe I should go out with someone too." The silence that followed was the true turning point of that conversation. Sloane blinked, like she'd been hit by an invisible slap. He saw the subtle shift in her posture, her once relaxed shoulders went stiff, and her hand gripped the fork more tightly. She hadn't seen that coming. This was her game, and Elliot had just picked up the pieces and flipped the board. "Oh, really?" Her voice came out a little lower, and for the first time that night, without that absolute confidence. Elliot kept his composure. "Yeah." He picked up his wineglass, swirling the liquid around. "Maybe I should give it a try too. There's a woman at the gym named Tessa. I think she'd be up for it." That's when he saw it. The change in her expression was almost imperceptible, but he was watching too closely to miss it. The color drained from Sloane's face for a brief second, and her lips pressed together in an involuntary reaction. It was all the confirmation he needed. If it really meant nothing to Sloane, if she truly believed this wouldn't affect their marriage, then why did the mention of another woman bother her so much? Because she wanted control. She wanted to be the only one calling the shots. But Elliot had just proven she no longer had that power over him. He didn't say anything else. He just kept eating, like it was any other day. But in that moment, he already knew. The rules of the game had just changed. Silence became a new presence in Elliot and Sloane's home. A silence that wasn't comfortable, wasn't shared, it was tense, sharp, heavy. A silence filled with unspoken thoughts and unresolved feelings. Sloane tried to act normal, but she knew something was different. Elliot hadn't argued, hadn't demanded explanations, hadn't made the scene she expected. On the contrary. He embraced her idea with a casualness that had left her completely unsettled. And now there he was, sitting on the couch, seemingly carefree, fiddling with his phone with a faint smile on his lips. It bothered her. Sloane watched him out of the corner of her eye, pretending to be focused on a book she couldn't really read. Ever since that dinner, Elliot seemed like a different person. His habits were the same, but he had a lightness about him now that he didn't have before, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He left for work early in the morning, came back at the same time as always, but there was something different about the way he carried himself. His gaze no longer held the same intensity when he looked at her. And that, more than anything else, made her uneasy. That's when she started noticing the little details. Elliot was putting more effort into his appearance. Nothing flashy, but enough for someone who knew him so well to pick up on. He spent more time choosing which shirt to wear, fixed his hair more carefully before leaving, and, above all, seemed more distant. His phone, which used to be left lying around the house, was now always with him. And it vibrated more often than she liked. Sloane didn't like that one bit. She tried to ignore it, told herself she didn't care. After all, she was the one who opened this door. She was the one who came up with the idea in the first place. But now she found herself on the edge of a cliff she hadn't anticipated when she decided to play with fire. Friday night was approaching, and the tension in her chest grew by the hour. She didn't understand why she felt that way. At the start of the week, she'd been sure she was in control. But now, for the first time, she felt that control slipping through her fingers. Then came the final blow. While they were making dinner on Thursday night, Elliot broke the silence. "Tomorrow I'm going out." Sloane, who was chopping vegetables on the cutting board, felt her hand falter for a second. She forced herself to keep moving, without looking up. "Oh, really?" "Yeah," he answered without rushing, not caring to add any details. She waited for him to say more, but all she heard was the sound of the knife on the cutting board and the low sizzle of oil heating in the pan. Her chest tightened. She didn't want to ask. She didn't want to seem curious. But she couldn't help herself. "Any specific plans?" Elliot wiped his hands on a dish towel, then turned and leaned against the counter. He looked at her for a moment before answering, and when he finally spoke, it was with a disconcerting calm. "I'm going out with Tessa." The knife stopped. All the air seemed to leave the kitchen. Sloane blinked a few times, processing what he'd just said. Her stomach twisted. Her heart started pounding in a way she didn't want to admit. But she took a deep breath, set the knife aside, and turned to him with a practiced smile. "That's good. Have fun." Elliot held her gaze for a moment, like he was waiting for a reaction beyond that. But when he realized she wouldn't give him the satisfaction, he just nodded, picked up his plate, and went to the dining room. Only when she was alone in the kitchen did she allow her expression to change. Sloane slumped against the counter, feeling her legs weaken. Her fingers gripped the edge of the marble as she tried to steady her breathing. She wanted to ignore what she was feeling. But she couldn't. The truth was undeniable, cruel, devastating. The thought of Elliot with another woman was eating her up inside. The next day, Sloane spent the entire day restless. She tried focusing on work, answering emails, booking meetings, but her thoughts kept circling back to the same question: was Elliot really going out with Tessa? She wanted to believe he was bluffing, just responding to her own move. But something inside her, something unsettling and persistent, told her he wasn't. Elliot wasn't the kind of man who played games. If he said he was going out with Tessa, then he would. As the hours passed, the uneasy feeling grew. For the first time in a long while, Sloane felt something she wasn't used to feeling: insecurity. By afternoon, she tried to ignore the anxiety and stick to her original plan. After all, she also had plans that night, a dinner with her coworker. He'd texted to confirm, and for a brief moment, she thought about agreeing. But the idea of being with another man while Elliot was with another woman made her stomach turn. She put her phone aside and went to the closet. She stood there, staring at the dresses hanging up, trying to decide what to wear. Normally, that would have been easy. But that night, nothing felt right. No outfit seemed good enough. That's when the truth hit her. She didn't want to go out. She wanted to be home when Elliot came back. She wanted to see what would happen when he walked through that door. Time kept ticking, and by 7 in the evening, Elliot still hadn't shown any sign he was changing his mind. He passed by the hallway wearing a neatly fitted shirt, his hair styled more carefully than usual. He grabbed his car keys, checked something on his phone, and left without hesitation. Sloane tried to seem indifferent. "You heading out now?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Elliot paused for a moment and looked at her. "Yeah." He didn't say anything else about when he'd be back or where he was going. He just opened the door and left. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed through the apartment, and Sloane felt a chill run down her spine. The place felt bigger, emptier than usual. The silence, once just a subtle tension, now felt deafening. She tried to distract herself, picked up her phone, opened some social media apps, but she couldn't focus on anything. The clock's hands seemed frozen. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Every second felt heavier. Then she grabbed her phone again and, almost without realizing, opened her chat with Elliot. The cursor blinked at her. She wanted to ask where he was. She wanted to know who he was with. But she couldn't. That would mean she'd lost. So she locked her phone and tossed it onto the couch. She got up and went to the kitchen, opened a bottle of wine, and poured herself a glass. But even after a few sips, the uneasy feeling still burned inside her. She wanted Elliot to call. She wanted him to text her. Anything. But he didn't. Minutes turned into hours. The apartment was so quiet she could hear her own breathing. She'd never felt like this before. Finally, around 11:30, she heard the sound of the lock turning. She froze. Elliot walked in calmly, taking his keys out of his pocket and placing them on the table by the door. The hall light only lit part of his face, but she could tell he was completely at ease. He didn't look like someone who'd had a tough night. If anything, he looked the opposite. Sloane got up slowly from the couch, trying to sound casual. "How was your night?" Elliot closed the door and slid his hands into his pockets. "It was good." The short answer made her stomach clench. She waited for more details, some kind of explanation, but he just headed to the bedroom without another word. She stood there in the middle of the living room, feeling a knot in her throat. For the first time, it really sunk in. She wasn't in control. And, worse than that, maybe she was losing Elliot. The next morning, Sloane woke before her alarm. The sun was barely up, but her eyes were already open, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange weight in her chest. She couldn't stop replaying the night before. Elliot had come home late, calmly, with no explanation. He didn't ask why she hadn't gone out, didn't show curiosity, didn't even taunt her. He just came in, answered her questions with a detached indifference, and went on with his life. And it was killing her. She rolled over, hoping to see Elliot asleep by her side. But his spot was empty. Her heart lurched. She got up quickly and went out of the bedroom. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed, a cup of coffee in hand, scrolling on his phone. It looked like a normal scene. But Sloane felt that nothing was normal anymore. "You're up early." Elliot looked up and regarded her for a second before answering. "I've got things to do today." His words hit her like a stone in the pit of her stomach. Things to do? Elliot had never spoken so vaguely. He always mentioned details about his day, talked about meetings or whatever was on his schedule. But now he just said things to do, and that was it. Sloane sat at the table, trying to seem unbothered, but she couldn't help asking, "Don't you want to talk about last night?" Elliot gave a short, cryptic smile. "Do you?" She opened her mouth to reply, but stopped. She had no idea what to say. She wanted to ask how it went, if he really was with Tessa, if he enjoyed it, if something happened between them. But asking would mean admitting she cared. And she couldn't do that. So she looked away and picked up an apple from the fruit bowl, taking a bite she didn't really want. Elliot finished his coffee, grabbed his wallet and keys, and headed for the door. "You're leaving now?" He paused in the hallway, looking at her. "Yeah." She frowned. "It's still early." "I know." He didn't offer anything else. No explanation. No promise he'd be back at his usual time. He just grabbed his coat, opened the door, and left. The sound of the door closing echoed in the apartment, and Sloane felt her chest tighten. It was all getting out of control. In the days that followed, life went on as usual, but with one terrifying difference for her: Elliot no longer seemed like the same man. He used to show interest in what she was doing, ask about her day, get involved in conversations even when he was tired. Now, he just seemed to coexist alongside her. Sloane tried making small talk, tried to bring back their old normal, but his answers were curt, monosyllabic, devoid of feeling. And worst of all, he didn't seem unhappy. That was the part that scared her the most. He wasn't cold in a resentful way. He didn't show anger, hurt, or any desire for revenge. There were no digs or little jabs. Just indifference. He seemed genuinely fine. And that made a silent panic grow inside her. For the first time in their marriage, she realized she had no hold on him. Elliot wasn't begging for attention, he wasn't arguing, he wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just living. And the more he pulled away, the more Sloane felt like she was on the brink of losing something she never should have taken for granted. Sloane spent the whole day tense, unable to focus on anything. Every few minutes she'd check the time, and the weight felt unbearable. When the sun went down, her anxiety peaked. Sitting on the couch, legs crossed, her fingers tapping nervously on the armrest, she tried to ignore the growing sense of dread. Then, at last, she heard the key in the lock. Her whole body tensed. Her heart raced. She straightened up, quickly running a hand through her hair like she was preparing for a showdown. Elliot walked in calmly, like nothing weighed on him, took off his coat, and tossed his keys onto the console by the door. The faint trace of his cologne and the easy way he carried himself made Sloane's stomach flip. "You left early today," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Yeah." Sloane waited for him to add something else, maybe mention where he'd been, or ask about her day, anything to show he still cared. But he just took a sip of water and picked up his phone, reading a few messages with a faint smile on his face. She felt a stab of anger. "Who were you with?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Elliot finally looked at her. There was no sweetness in his eyes anymore, or the irritation she'd expected. Just calm. "Why does it matter?" Those words hit her like a bomb. Why did it matter? Because she could no longer ignore it. Because she was feeling exactly what she'd wanted Elliot to feel when she first mentioned that dinner with her coworker. Because, for the first time, she wasn't the one calling the shots. But she couldn't say that. So she took a deep breath, fighting to keep her composure. "Because we're married," she answered, trying to sound firm, though her voice shook a little. Elliot set his phone down on the counter and crossed his arms. "Are we?" A chill raced up Sloane's spine. "What's that supposed to mean?" Elliot leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. "It means I've spent the last few days thinking. And I realized you were right. Going out to dinner with someone else doesn't change anything, right? So if it really doesn't mean anything, maybe our marriage doesn't mean that much, either." Her stomach dropped. "Elliot, He grabbed something from the counter and placed it gently on the table in front of her. A stack of papers. Sloane's heart pounded. Her eyes followed the text until she reached the title, Divorce Agreement. She held her breath. A shock ran through her body like electricity. "What?" Her voice broke. "It's all signed. I just need yours." Sloane felt the room spin. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. She clutched the papers like she wanted to rip them up and make this all go away. "You can't be serious." Elliot let out a humorless laugh. "And you can't be surprised." A crushing silence fell between them. Sloane never thought it would end like this. That the man who'd always been there for her, who never gave up on their marriage, who always tried to keep the peace, would be the first to leave. Fear climbed up her throat, but she swallowed it. She had to fix this. She had to make Elliot change his mind. She took a deep breath, pushing the papers aside. "Okay. I forgive you for going out with Tessa. We can forget about all this and start over." Elliot laughed again, not with relief or humor, but a bitter edge. "You forgive me?" he repeated, incredulous. She felt a knot tighten in her chest. "Yes. If you forget what I said about going out with my coworker, we can pretend none of this happened." Elliot's gaze hardened. He leaned in slightly, his voice firm and unwavering, and said the sentence that shattered Sloane completely, "I don't need your forgiveness." She froze. Elliot grabbed his coat and picked up a suitcase that was already packed. Sloane jumped up, panicked. "Wait. Where are you going?" He opened the door. "Moving on." Without another word, he walked out. The sky was already dark when the door closed behind him. Sloane stayed there, staring at nothing, hearing only her own heart pounding in her ears. The apartment felt huge, silent, empty. And at that moment, she understood that she'd never really been afraid of losing Elliot because of love. What really scared her was losing control over him. But now, it no longer mattered. Because it was already too late. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.